Ukraine has flipped the negotiations in its favor. Zelenskyy has confirmed it. A ticking deadline. A war may be approaching its most dangerous moment. Inside Ukraine's intelligence community, one date keeps resurfacing: February 2026. Is this the last window for peace or the prelude for total escalation? Even Russia's former partners are backing away. Kazakhstan opens hundreds of criminal cases and shifts toward NATO standards. EU sanctions are strangling Russia's weapons production as Ukrainian engineers do the impossible. A superweapon is on the way. Moscow's propaganda about captured cities collapses on the battlefield. Watch until the end. All the details in our special edition of Hotspot. Will the war end in February 2026? According to Ukraine's military intelligence chief, this time frame may be the most realistic window for a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, based on the combination of battlefield dynamics and internal pressures, including critical issues like energy and heating. At the same time, Vladimir Putin is signaling the opposite: a clear lack of readiness and desire to end this war. So is February 2026 truly the moment when the war could end, or just another illusion? Let's take a closer look.
A peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia is inevitable, and the optimal moment for its signing will come as early as February 2026. Kirill Budanov admitted this during his latest interview. According to the head of the main intelligence directorate, despite all the Kremlin's assurances that the special military operation is going according to plan, the real situation on the front for Russian soldiers and generals is stalemated.
The Russian Federation? The Russian Federation is not stopping its offensive operation. Yes, they are have not achieved the pace they dreamed of, but they are moving forward.
However, the real situation at the front is drastically different from the reports that end up on Putin's desk. On paper in the Kremlin, Budanov explains, things are going great for the occupier's army. That's why the bunker dweller doesn't see any reason to sit down at the negotiating table. He insists on the complete capture of the Ukrainian regions written into the Russian constitution.
This is an attempt to gain full control over the Donetsk region. Maximum, let's say, advancement in the Dnipropetrovsk region and continued operations in the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions, which in principle they have never tried to hide. These are, let's say, their main tasks. Along with increasing the size of sanitary zones, buffer zones, whatever you want to call them, along the border. In principle, the task for 2026 is Donbass and Zaporizhzhia. Zaporizhzhia, the whole region, is their dream.
But there is no harm in dreaming. The Kremlin immediately pulls itself up. Kirill Budanov. Thanks to the coordinated work of our defenders, it is becoming increasingly difficult for Russian generals to lie about their successes at the front. And yes, Putin himself is no fool. The endless drone attacks on the Russian capital and key oil refineries in Russia are seriously undermining the Kremlin's desire to keep pushing forward in Ukraine.
Look at how it's become fashionable here to talk about Ukraine's sanctions against the Russian Federation. What is meant are the strikes on the fuel and energy sector. Do you understand what kind of loss that is? Right now, that figure is about 21% of all oil refining in the Russian Federation and everything related to gasoline production. Can you even imagine what kind of money that is? I don't think you can. Let's put it this way. Let's just say it's a lot. Look at everything, and the Russian economy is built on this. Oil, gas, and let's say gold. That's it, there's nothing else. Since the end of spring, Russia has basically entered a steady economic recession. It's not a collapse, but problems are mounting. Take a look at the Russian Federation's budget for 2026. It's catastrophic, well, as it would be for any country, really. Let's take the name Russia out of it and just say it's some country somewhere. It's catastrophic. All programs have been cut, except for defense. Nothing else remains. That's why they've already made quite a few decisions. Unpopular and difficult ones. Very difficult and painful for them. This is yet another explanation for the negotiation process.
According to military analysts, with each passing day and every new strike by the Ukrainian armed forces, there are more and more supporters of a ceasefire in the Kremlin.
A negotiation process is definitely necessary. There's no way around it, one way or another.
And even though official Russian propaganda keeps repeating 24/7 on TV that the special military operation is going according to plan, both Ukrainian and Russian military personnel understand the reality. The situation at the front is a stalemate, which means it's high time to sit down at the negotiating table.
By calculation, this is the most favorable period for both Russia and Ukraine to achieve something. This is connected to military activity, the heating season, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of factors involved.
It's possible that right at this moment, working groups from both countries are finalizing a peace agreement. According to military analysts, many factors point to this. However, this is not being made public.
The negotiation process, if we want to succeed in it, and I'm not just talking about ours specifically, but as a general formula for achieving a good or at least somewhat acceptable outcome, any kind of result in the negotiation process. This is the principle of silence, of maintaining silence. No negotiations in the world that fail to maintain silence, especially those dealing with very complex issues, like obviously the war between Russia and Ukraine, have ever succeeded without observing a regime of silence. They always failed.
Knowing Kirill Budanov, I can say with complete confidence, this man is like the wind. He never gives up. So it's quite possible that in the coming months, we may finally see the long-awaited ceasefire and an end to the bloodshed, in which to date the Russian army has lost, wounded and killed more than 1.2 million soldiers.
Kazakhstan has launched more than 700 criminal cases against its citizens who fought on Russia's side against Ukraine. At the same time, Astana is moving toward NATO standard weapons and rapidly expanding cooperation with the United States. Taken together, these steps suggest a strategic shift that would have seemed unthinkable just a few years ago. Is Kazakhstan quietly breaking away from Russia? And if so, what does this mean for the balance of power in the region? Full details in our report.
The Kremlin likes to say that Kazakhstan is an ally and a brother, a quiet rear, people for the front, money bypassing sanctions and loyalty by default. We
have a special relationship with Kazakhstan that's obvious. Everyone understands it well. We have an allied relationship in the most literal sense of the word.
But in reality, Astana itself is moving further away from Russia with each passing day.
Mr. President, I greatly appreciate your unwavering support for the development of multifaceted Kazakh-American cooperation. And I firmly believe that you, Mr. President, are a great leader, a statesman sent by the heavens to restore the common sense and traditions that we all share and value. And
is taking a demonstrative step by condemning its own citizens for fighting on Russia's side against Ukraine.
The authorities in Kazakhstan are carrying out mass persecution of participants in the war in Ukraine. In 2025, local law enforcement initiated a record 700 cases against those who enlisted in Russian military formations. In such cases, the courts do not care where the accused served. They hand down identical sentences both to Wagner PMC fighters and to those who signed contracts with the Ministry of Defense. From the perspective of Kazakhstan's criminal code, all of them were carrying out criminal intent by participating in the war.
Kazakhstan has never really supported the Kremlin's military adventures, but this was a punch in the gut for Putin. Although for Astana, such a decision is logical and necessary.
This speaks to the rather sensible policy of the Kazakh authorities. In very simple terms, they understand perfectly well that Kazakhstan could be one of Putin's next targets. That's why it's essential to build as much as possible, not even so much an agitation campaign, but to ensure that citizens clearly understand what's happening in Ukraine today, that this is an imperialist war waged by Russia with the aim of redrawing current borders. And accordingly, any other post-Soviet countries, and not only post-Soviet countries, could become targets for Putin. And that's why, of course, it's important to conduct explanatory work with our own citizens.
These are not just words, this is what, albeit quietly, Putin actually wants. And he's wanted this for a very long time. The US has declassified transcripts of Putin's conversations with President Bush from 2001. From these, it follows that Putin views Kazakhstan the same way he does Ukraine. Supposedly, the entire territory of the country is a gift from the Soviet Union.
The Russians gave away thousands of square kilometers of territory voluntarily, Putin said, to Bush in the summer of 2001. It's unheard of. Ukraine, which had been part of Russia for centuries, was given away. Kazakhstan was given away too, the Caucasus as well. It's hard to imagine, and it was done by the party leaders.
That's why Kazakhstan is working day by day to distance itself from Russia. It's not about breaking off relations, but about being able to conduct both foreign and domestic policy without looking back at Russia.
Already today, Russia has significantly lost its original historical influence in Kazakhstan. China's economic and political influence there is quite strong. Turkey's cultural and strategic influence is also strong, and the influence of the United States with its various interests is certainly also present. That's why I think that in this situation, Tokayev will draw even closer to some alternative international allies, realizing that he needs serious protection from Vladimir Putin's militaristic and expansionist policies.
A slap in the face for the Kremlin was Kazakhstan's decision to launch a project to produce weapons according to NATO standards. In Russia, this has already been called an unfriendly act. Moreover, Russian politicians are saying that Kazakhstan is being turned into yet another Russophobic outpost.
The question immediately arises, why is NATO so interested in Kazakhstan in particular? Maybe it's because it borders Russia, and from this country, yet another Russophobic outpost could be created?
But again, this is Kazakhstan's contribution to its own security, because with a neighbor like Russia, you can expect anything.
All Russian military models, in fact, are quite significantly outdated in their technological capabilities and overall design. Therefore, of course, from the crucial perspective of national defense capability and strategic advantage, it's much more strategically interesting and beneficial to produce modern NATO standard weaponry and equipment. So this important decision, once again, clearly demonstrates the remarkable prudence and foresight of Kazakhstan's leadership in their long-term planning.
While Russia is at war and ends up on blacklists, Kazakhstan is becoming a country with which it is profitable and safe for the West to make deals. In particular, Kazakhstan is deepening its cooperation with America.
Kazakhstan and the United States have signed an agreement worth $17 billion. Kazakhstan is granting the United States access to its tungsten deposits. Trump invited Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to the G20 summit in the United States of America.
But obviously, it's not just about resources. After the visit of Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev to the US, experts began actively discussing that Kazakhstan is now within Trump's sphere of interest. After Tokayev's visit to Washington, Russia also began circling around him from all sides, likely sensing that its ally was slipping away. Even the foul-mouthed propagandist Solovyov toned down his usual fervor and reacted calmly to the development of relations between Kazakhstan and the US.
The longest borders of the Russian Federation are actually with Kazakhstan. Now, many people are saying, well, the leadership of Kazakhstan was in America. They were. Did they talk to Trump? They did. So what do you expect?
Kazakhstan has quite specific economic and political objectives. Kazakhstan is in a very difficult geographical position. Next to it is giant Russia, and next to it is giant China. Of course. First and foremost, the leadership of Kazakhstan is interested in the interests of its own people and its own country. With
welcome banners all over Moscow for weeks. Later, Tokayev was received by Putin.
Dear Kassym-Jomart Kemelevic, good evening. First of all, I sincerely want to express my gratitude to you for graciously finding the necessary time to come, as we had previously agreed, on this very important and special state visit. I am sincerely glad about this.
As a result of the negotiations, Kazakhstan and Russia signed a treaty on comprehensive cooperation.
President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, and President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Kemelevic Tokayev, are signing the declaration on elevating interstate relations between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Kazakhstan to the level of comprehensive strategic partnership and alliance.
But experts call this agreement an empty shell because after it was signed, absolutely nothing changed in the relations between Russia and Kazakhstan.
It was more like, well, a ceremonial ritual visit, so to speak, because behind any substantial concrete actions, there should always be clear, well-defined agreements and absolutely clear, comprehensive treaties. There is nothing more concrete there except for pretty words, a bit more of an Eastern cunning. Yes, well, we'll tell you, yes, great Tsar, we'll nod along to you. But in reality, we'll be developing cooperation with completely different countries and shaping our own foreign policy. In fact, moving away from Russia, not getting closer to it. Therefore, in my opinion, this is exactly what it shows.
It's obvious that today this alliance exists only in words. Kazakhstan is not showing an anti-Russian stance. It is simply acting in its own interests. And for the Kremlin, this is perhaps even worse than open confrontation. After all, it turns out, right next door, There is a country that no longer asks for permission.
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has categorically denied Kremlin disinformation about the alleged capture of Gulyai-Pole, Mirnograd, and Kupiansk by Russian forces. Moscow's claims do not reflect reality on the ground. Ukrainian units continue to hold positions, repel assaults, and inflict losses on the enemy across these directions. The situation remains dynamic, but there is no confirmation of the occupiers' seizure of these cities. We break down the real state of affairs on these fronts and other key sectors, separating facts from propaganda and explaining what is actually happening on the battlefield. All the details in our report.
A high-level meeting, important negotiations between Ukraine and the US, and Putin and his entourage are launching a wave of fakes and lies to weaken Kiev's position ahead of the meeting with Trump in Florida.
Today, judging very carefully by your comprehensive reports and also by the observable and consistent pace we are currently observing on the entire line of contact, our profound and strategic interest in the complete and unconditional withdrawal of all Ukrainian military formations from the extensive territories they presently occupy is, in essence, practically and utterly reduced to an absolute zero.
At headquarters, generals reported to the Russian dictator on camera about the complete capture of Mirnograd and Gulyai-Pole.
The city of Gulyai-Pole has been liberated. In addition, over the past 2 weeks, 5 more settlements in these directions have been brought under control.
The situation in Mirnograd and Gulyai-Pole, where the occupiers recently captured a battalion command post, is indeed very difficult. But the fighting in the cities continues. Ukrainian defenders are holding their positions. Assault troops from the 425th Skala Regiment and units of the main intelligence directorate have been redeployed to Gulyai-Pole. Mirnograd is in the gray zone. Intense street fighting is ongoing.
We are still in Mirnograd. Let Gerasimov stop bullshitting and showing off.
The Ukrainian General Staff states that Putin and the Russian generals have started churning out disinformation in order to bolster Russia's position ahead of Zelensky's meeting with Trump.
The highest political leadership of the aggressor state is once again resorting to spreading fake statements about significant successes of the Russian army on the battlefield. In reality, the Kremlin's reports about the capture of the cities of Gulyai-Pole and Mirnograd are not supported by facts.
Putin is essentially creating a show for Trump. Let's call things by their proper names. This is essentially a one-man theatrical show designed for a single solitary spectator. Putin consistently continues to relentlessly try to create that very same, well, deeply propagandistic and overtly manipulative reconstruction, as if absolutely everything is proceeding entirely according to his grand plan for them.
Meanwhile, Azov, together with the forces of Ukraine's drone systems, are destroying Russian columns with heavy equipment near Dobropilya. The Kremlin is flooding the information space with lies, manipulation, and disinformation.
In Kupiansk and the city of Krasnoarmysk, the enemy has found itself blocked and surrounded. By the way, I discussed this important issue with the commanders of their respective operational groups. They are certainly not opposed. Andriy Romanovich, not opposed to allowing authorized representatives of the media, international foreign journalists, into the enemy's currently encircled zones.
Today, the Kupiansk direction, our soldiers here are achieving results for Ukraine. The Russians talked a lot about Kupiansk, and we can see that. I congratulated the guys. Thank you to everyone who congratulated them, to everyone fighting here, to everyone destroying the occupiers. Today, it is very important to achieve results at the front so that Ukraine can achieve results in diplomacy.
Earlier, hoping to influence Donald Trump in parallel with the successful counterattacks by the Ukrainian armed forces in Kupiansk, which resulted in the occupiers being driven out of the city, the Russian dictator and his military political entourage publicly lied about the situation at the front.
Is the continuation of the war a desirable scenario for the Russians? Well, that's debatable, because there are major systemic problems in the Russian economy. So, will they be able to maintain this pace of warfare for a long time? No. By the way, Budanov mentioned this in one of his recent interviews, but they will keep up appearances. They'll put on a brave face in a bad situation and continue fighting, trying to show that they can supposedly achieve their goals by military means.
In reality, as reflected on the front line, even when the Russians achieve minimal advances, it comes at the cost of enormous losses, both in equipment and personnel.
Year Europe has stepped up its support for Ukraine. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stated openly that Europe can never match the scale of sacrifice made by the Ukrainian people. Meanwhile, analysts from the Insider report that EU sanctions have seriously hampered Russia's ability to produce weapons, delivering a tangible blow to the Kremlin's military industry. What this means for Russia's war machine and how Europe's pressure is reshaping the battlefield, here are the key details.
Europe stands with Ukraine. Our country is supported by the leading figures of the diplomatic world. Europeans are the guarantors of Ukraine's security against Russian aggression.
Today I spoke with the Prime Minister of Norway. I am also grateful to Jonas for his unwavering support. I informed him that in our ongoing talks with America, we also discussed with Jonas possible next joint steps. And I will also speak with other European leaders so that we are all moving at the same pace and share a common goal.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that representatives of Ukraine, leading EU countries and the United States have agreed to jointly pursue 5 objectives on the path to ending the war that Russia is waging against our country.
The main driving force behind support for Ukraine is Poland, the Baltic countries. Not because they love us so much, but because they understand that they are next. And they understand that if Russia is stopped now in Ukraine, they won't have to do it on their own territories. That's their motivation. Macron, for his part, is still always looking for some kind of relationship with Russia, but again, that's also a particular trait of French business. Just look at how many French companies, even after 4 years of full-scale war, are still operating in the Russian market.
International support for Ukraine includes military, financial, and humanitarian aid. In 2025, European countries have stepped up their support for Ukraine, not least because of the reduction in aid from the United States.
Europe has decided to allocate 90 billion euros to Ukraine for the next 2 years. There are different opinions about this decision because there were 2 options on the table. The first is the one that was adopted, which is direct aid from European countries. The second was to use frozen Russian assets. The fact that Europe is not ready to use Russian frozen assets is definitely a drawback because it sends Russia the message, don't worry about your money, it will be safe. We'll spend our own money first and only then will we move on to spending yours.
A heavy blow to the Russian military-industrial complex this year was the tightening of sanctions, which affected Russian oil tycoons Lukoil and Rosneft. The main producers of Iskander-M missiles, the Machine Building Design Bureau and the Votkinsk plant are also under sanctions from most of Ukraine's partners.
The Russian economy it's steadily moving downward. In fact, this current year, 2025, it's unclear how it will end for Russia because there will be a budget deficit. This deficit already exceeds the size of the National Welfare Fund for the first time, by the way, in Russia's history, when reserves are not enough to cover the deficit. And this is, among other things, a result of the sanctions.
In addition to sanctions, there are problems with weapons production. The extraction of materials to supply the occupier's army has led to consistent strikes by defense forces on Russian strategic targets. The decline in Russian arms exports confirms the degradation of Russia's military-industrial complex.
The cancellation of the damper, which most likely has already happened, is already leading to fuel shortages at Russian gas stations, since it was precisely the damper that allowed fuel sellers to receive compensation for selling fuel in Russia instead of on foreign markets.
For the first time since the Soviet era, in 2026 Russia will spend 40% of its budget on the war. Similar figures are projected in the plans for 2027 and 2028, which once again confirms that the aggressor country intends to continue military actions and is in no way inclined toward peace.
Ukraine is rapidly strengthening its military capabilities, driven both by substantial international military aid and the explosive growth of its domestic defense industry. Today, Ukraine's own producers already supply over 40% of the weapons used on the battlefield, from drones and missiles to artillery systems and armored vehicles. This surge highlights not only rapid adaptation under wartime pressure, but also a sharp expansion of production capacity. What this shift means for the war and Ukraine's long-term military resilience in our full report.
Our own HIMARS, advanced domestic drone production, and Ukrainian naval drones. All of these are a nightmare for the enemy at night, and Ukraine has no intention of stopping. Ukraine is actively ramping up the scale of its own weapons production. Just last year, production capacity and output increased several times over.
Undoubtedly, since 2022, Ukraine's defense industrial complex has made not just a step forward, but I would say a leap forward. This is truly a high-quality, multifaceted development in the production of completely different types of weapons, ammunition, equipment, and armored vehicles.
Drone production. This is an area where Ukraine has not only developed significantly, but also holds leading positions in the world. In Ukraine, drone production has increased by 900% over the past year, according to Defense Express.
Today, Ukraine's defense industrial complex is at the forefront when it comes to drone system solutions. I can't name any other countries in the world where this category has developed so rapidly, both at the tactical and operational tactical levels.
The number of drones being delivered to the front has also increased significantly. By the end of 2025, the armed forces are expected to receive 3 million FPV drones. That's almost 2.5 times more than what was supplied to the Ukrainian armed forces last year.
At the same time, the overwhelming majority of these drones are domestically produced. Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal.
Moreover, in 2024, the government invested over 39 billion hryvnias in weapons production, which allowed the capacity of the domestic defense industry to increase sixfold, and now more than 96% of the drones used by the Ukrainian army are domestically produced.
We have developed not only a whole range of unmanned aerial vehicles capable of destroying Russian manpower, that is, infantry and equipment, at the tactical level on the battlefield, but also of striking the rear areas of the Russian Federation using both aerial and maritime strike drones.
Missiles are an important sector of domestic production. For example, Ukraine is working on its own version of the HIMARS system.
Although Ukraine will have its own missiles in service, there is a lack of experience and existing weaponry that could be used with the domestic missile system.
The emergence of a domestic HIMARS equivalent is clearly driven by the needs of the military and the development of Ukrainian strike capabilities, including long-range systems, as well as reducing dependence on the American defense industry.
It can be assumed that the Ukrainian missile system will be created through cooperation with the Bogdana self-propelled artillery system, but when? Germany will allocate 750 million euros for the production of 200 units of our self-propelled artillery systems based on German Zetros trucks. Similarly, the production of Ukrainian missile systems could be funded in the future.
One of the most effective Ukrainian weapons is the Bogdana artillery system. Its use accounts for about 40% of all artillery on the front line. Moreover, in terms of its characteristics, the system is approaching the French Caesar self-propelled artillery despite a shorter development and improvement period. Other Ukrainian developments also prove their effectiveness on the battlefield every day. For example, the number of successful hits by the Neptune missile has increased significantly. And the main value of the Sapsan missile system is its range and power, since it is designed to strike deep behind enemy lines.
If Sapsan goes into mass production, strikes will hit those areas much more frequently. It will be tough for the Russians.
The combat use of the Ruta drone missile has also increased.
The main advantage and capability of the Ruta is its high speed, 500 to 800 kilometers per hour, which reduces the effectiveness of Russian counterparts, namely mobile fire teams. And it completely eliminates Russian anti-drone helicopters from the list of air defense options.
And how could we not mention the Flamingo missile in this context? According to The Independent, the Ukrainian Flamingo missile is twice as good as the American Tomahawk. It has a range of up to 3,000 kilometers and can carry a warhead weighing over a ton.
The Flamingo has twice the range of the American Tomahawk and carries twice the explosive payload.
Battle. The Flamingo has entered the fight, along with the long-range Neptune, Neptune D, and other types of missile and semi-missile weaponry, so to speak. It is already bringing its successes, yielding results, and of course 2026, I am more than certain, will see a much larger scale and, very importantly, a combined strike on Russian territory. Strikes that are similar and possibly even superior in some respects. And
of course, the nightmare of the Kerch Bridge, the SBU's Sea drones, Sea Baby.
The same air. Sea Baby can perform completely different drone missions or act as a kamikaze in various operations. And
these are just some of Ukraine's main developments. Many of them are produced under strict secrecy. Moreover, Western allies have increased their arms supplies to Ukraine. In particular, this concerns artillery. This was reported by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The main thing is that all these Ukrainian innovations point to one thing. Strikes against the enemy will become stronger and more precise.
At this moment, that's all from me, Maria Farafonova. Even more hellish frontline news in our next episode. But for now, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.